A certain dervish rode across the desert on his camel to the tent of his Sufi teacher. And after dismounting and entering the tent and giving the usual salutations to the master, the dervish said, "I have such faith and trust in God that He will take care of those who love Him, that I have left my camel untethered." And the master replied, "You fool, go and tie your camel. God is not going to do for you what you are perfectly capable of doing for yourself." The other day, the stories that were told brought the question, what is the relationship between time and timing to an inquiry into divine psychology? And it allows a personal story to be told, which allows a question to be asked of us. Some of you perhaps already know this story, but it was that time when the husband, Singshi, was transferred to Hawaii, and we took up residence in the company home out at the edge of the beautiful island of Oahu. And just after being in there for a few weeks, our neighbor, a Japanese lady married to an American man, invited me over for coffee, and we finished up having many hours of long conversation about spiritual things, during which time she told me that she had been with a spiritual master called Divine Mother for about 12 or 13 years. After this, she and I and other neighbors shared yoga together, and oftentimes we would feel Divine Mother's presence with us during the sessions. But then one day, the husband said to me, "Why don't you ask Anne to introduce us to her Divine Mother?" And out of my mouth came, "No, it has to be at the right time." Now, after this, I happened to meet a yogi master from the mainland, and that precipitated experiences that lasted for about 1.5 years of an intense occult nature, and that's completely another story. But after that 18 months, about a month after all of the occult activities had ceased, there was an occasion for me to join the husband, Singshi, in Singapore for an anniversary dinner of some magnitude. So it happened that in speaking to the neighbor, Anne, who had just retired from Hawaiian Airlines, that perhaps we could make a little pilgrimage together. And so we decided that she and I would travel, first of all, to Japan to meet her artist sister there, and then we would go to Taiwan and visit friends, because there had been time living in Taiwan, during which time Anne, the neighbor, would return to Hawaii, and I would fly on to Singapore for the dinner. During our time in Japan, we were sitting in a little guest house, Rokyan, I think they're called. It was the middle of winter. It was freezing cold, so we were sitting in our kimonos around a tiny little brazier, meditating. And after the meditation, I said to Anne, "I've just had a vision." And she said, "Oh, that's very strange, because I have too." So when we compared our visions, they were almost exactly the same. The vision was that she and I were walking along a path which seemed to be on a cliff edge, and then coming towards us was a group of monks. They were obviously monks because she and I described their cassocks, their brown cassocks. The only difference between our visions was that I had seen a golden disc above the heads of this group. But in the vision, both of us melded with this group of monks. Now we went on to Taiwan, and I flew on to Singapore, and Anne flew back to Hawaii. And during those days in Singapore, I rang Anne to see whether she'd arrived back in Hawaii safely, because she was on a standby ticket and so forth. And she said to me, "I've spoken to Divine Mother about you, and Divine Mother wants to meet you." So, of course, when I went back to Hawaii, I immediately went into the presence of Divine Mother, which of course starts yet another story. But the question that arises out of this, that is posed to us, is, in relationship to divine psychology, who was the initiator of this divine psychology? Was it Divine Mother tuning in to my psyche, my being? Was it some force dictating that it was time for this meeting? Was it my own psyche that was bringing it to the right time? What say you from your experiences of the stories of time and timing that we're attempting to relate to divine psychology? What would you say? What answer would you give? Was it a divine force? Was it Divine Mother? Was it my own psyche? What's your experience of such?
I find, since we're all vibrational beings, everything unfolds exactly in perfect time. It has to do with vibration of all the participants. So it's neither of those people initiated it, but it's just that when the vibrations were matched, then the event happened.
Okay, thank you.
There's a right time and place for everything, and obviously you were in the right time and the right place to have all those events and those visions unfold for you, which led to where you went and to where you are now. You know, so without that time and time, it wouldn't happen.
And how does this relate to divine psychology, which we're exploring, attempting to understand, with the possibility that we can ourselves claim to be divine psychologists.
Well, I feel that it's us. Like when we're open enough, and then that thing comes, then we follow it. And then once we follow it, then everything else like matches up to it.
All right.
That's what I feel. Like my experience is, like when we came up here, there was lots of other organisations that we could, you know, the spiritual place down in Cairns, there was, you know, the guru, whoever his name was, all these other different things that we could have gone to, that was offered to us. But for some reason we didn't go there. But when Kerry said that she was going to meditation, straight away I knew that's where I was going.
Yes.
That's my little experience.
Yes.
It's a bit like that ghost house down at Gordonvale that you loved.
Yes.
And I was working at the time, and I said, I'll meet you there after work, and I walked into this house, and it's like, no. The house was beautiful, but the vibe was horrible. So the real estate agent asked Bonnie how long her husband had been weird like that. And then we were meant to come up here, you know, for some reason. Yeah. I mean, it would have been too hard to drive to meditation from Gordonvale. Everything is perfect out there.
Well, for me it was, we had a friend that came to see you for meditation, and she kept insisting, you have to come and meet this lady. You have to come and meet this lady, come to meditation. And something or other always happened, and we didn't go. And then one day we went, and you said, you come at the right time.
It seems to me that it's like when the fruit is ripe, it drops. And I know there can be so many things involved in that, whether the rain, the sunshine, it's all in the whole, you know, the wholeness of everything that comes together.
Yes.
And it's
As
just up,
Frank is saying.
yeah, it's just up to us to, I suppose, be open to that, of when our own knowing, you know, connects with all of those, you know, I think that.
Yes. So this inquiry into divine psychology is opening up, to my way of expressing, a beautiful flower of awareness for us, because we have to bring together so many of the other threads that allow it to occur. Thank you.